Okay, and I think we're live. Welcome everyone. For those new here, my name's Nicki. I'm an author and editor, and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading, and all the other things I love. And it's the latter we're here for today because it is pretty much the end of the month, one more day to go. And I'm going to wrap up the TV and film I've been watching during December. So without any further ado, let me just get rid of this banner out of the way. There we go. So it's been a fairly busy viewing month for me in many ways. When I just was writing down all these titles for the video description, I thought, oh, actually, now I look at it, I have watched quite a lot, partly because I've watched a number of films. So I'm going to kick off with stuff I've watched on DVD. So I bought New Mutants on DVD, and this one, I didn't really bother going to see it in the cinema, but I've seen all the other XMen films, so I figured I should watch this one too. Typically, now I've started this broadcast, I feel like I want to sneeze, so apologies if I suddenly cut off with a terrible sneeze in a minute. That's always the way. I was perfectly fine all morning until I just go live, and now my nose is running and I want to sneeze. So this is just typical. New Mutants, anyway. This was a strange one. I still can't quite decide how I feel about it. I mean, obviously, the style of this film is incredibly different from all the other X-Men films. It's done more as a sort of a horror story in some ways. There were elements I liked. Once the action got going, I really enjoyed the fighting scenes, the mutants using their powers. However, it was a very, very slow start, and my husband actually fell asleep. He was next to me watching it on the couch, and he didn't even last up until the fighting scenes and the dramatic finale. He fell asleep about half an hour in, about a third of the way through. And I must admit, I was sitting there kind of thinking, when is something interesting going to happen? It was fine to build up the characters and get a bit of characterization going, but it just felt a bit too dragging, that opening half for me. So it's an interesting one. I might give it another watch, maybe give it another try in the future, but it's not one that I thought, oh, well, I love this. It's amazing, all the way through. So it's probably not one I'm going to rewatch all the time kind of thing. So if you're already a fan of the franchise, then I'm sure you'll find something to like in it. But if you haven't watched any X-Men films before and don't come to this one expecting it to be a typical superhero story. The next one I watched was actually one I watched with my husband because I bought it for him for Christmas, and that was Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Look, it was okay. I really love the original 3 Alien movies, but I've never been into Predator, and so I've never really gotten into the Alien versus Predator stuff. It was pretty predictable, you could tell who was going to die. You wanted to yell at them for their stupidity half the time. It was entertaining enough, but it's not something I'd rave about, just because it wasn't my thing. I think my husband enjoyed it, so that's the main thing, so I bought it for him. And the other one is a DVD I received for my birthday, and that is Yuri on Ice, which I'm not going to go into in too much detail because I've already talked about it on a previous one of these videos. When I first watched it, it was great to see it again. My husband hadn't seen it. I'd watched it on Crunchyroll on the PC previously, so I made him watch it with me as it was only a few episodes. And although he won't like me saying this on a public broadcast, but he enjoyed it in the end, and it's great. It's so cute. If you haven't seen it, it's an anime about figure skaters, so it's really adorable. Next up, I watched 3 films during the Japanese Film Festival, which took place the first 2 weeks of December, and because of COVID and everything this year, it was online and free. So I had about 5 or 6 things picked out that I wanted to take a look at, and I ended up watching 3 of them with time and other things playing in, so I was fairly pleased with that. The first one I watched was Dance With Me, and the premise of this film is a young woman has to take her niece to entertain her for the day, and takes her to this fairground where they meet a hypnotist. And the young niece is about to star in a musical at school, and she's really nervous, so she asks the hypnotist to make her a wonderful musical theatre star. So he does his magic and says, whenever you hear music, you'll want to sing and dance. Unfortunately, this doesn't work on the niece, but it does work on the aunt, who then suddenly starts bursting into song and dance every time any music comes on, including in the middle of meetings at her company and dinners with her boss or colleague. So it's great fun. Look, it's a little bit silly. It didn't feel a natural segue sometimes into the songs, but it was really amusing. I liked the characters. It was just a good laugh. So if you like musicals, then you'll like this. There's something to enjoy here. Another musical in a slightly different vein was Lady Maiko. This is essentially a Japanese take on My Fair Lady. We have a young girl who wants to become a Maiko, which is like a sort of geisha trainee. But she's got a terrible country accent. She's not polished. She's never going to make it. But a guy who's there makes a bet that he can turn her into the perfect Maiko. And thus begins the Fair Lady storyline, where she's trying to learn to speak properly and to dance and to perform all these important arts that she needs to learn to be a Maiko and a geisha. It was good fun. I mean, I felt it could have done with a few more songs, maybe. It was a fairly long film. It could have been condensed a little, or perhaps put a couple more musical numbers in, but it was enjoyable, and it was fun to see there was the Rain in Spain type scene. And, you know, if you like My Fair Lady, and again, if you like musicals, then you'll find something enjoyable in this one. And the final one I watched is just a straight drama, Cafe Funiculi Funicula, which is a film version of the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And the premise of this book and film is there's a cafe in which if you sit in a particular seat, you can travel back in time or forward in time, but most people go back, but only within the cafe. So if there's someone you want to see again who's maybe died or left, as long as you were with them in the cafe at some point, you can travel back in time and perhaps say the things you wanted to say to them and didn't get a chance to do. So it's a really sweet film. I mean, I liked the book, and I think it works really well on the screen. There's some great imagery for the sort of movement as they fall back in time, and good casting. It was just a really sweet and enjoyable film. I shed a tear here and there. And if you've read the book, you'll like it. And even if you haven't read the book, it's worth checking out. It's a really fun story. Sticking with films for now, but moving on to SBS On Demand, which in Australia is just a free-to-air online streaming service. And I watched 5 films during December, quite a few. I think I've still got about 4 to watch, though, on there that I currently need to look at. But I'll start off with the Japanese one, which was Blade of the Immortals. So this is kind of a fantasy action film, I guess we'd say. Bit of a revenge storyline. The main guy accidentally caused the death of a family member, and in penance he tries to take revenge, but before he takes out quite a few people, but before he can die, a wise old woman / goddess, we're not quite sure, comes and puts these kind of worm things in him that make him immortal. So he's still living several years later when a young girl whose family has been attacked and killed by this rising cult comes to him for help. I won't say any more than that. It goes the way you'd expect it to go. There's huge amounts of violence and fighting, and it was entertaining though. I liked it. I can't say too much about it really. I enjoyed it, but it's not something I'd rush to watch again. I think once was enough. The other 4 I watched were, I think, all Korean. Yes, all Korean. So first off was Burning. So this is a film based on a short story by the Japanese writer Murakami Haruki, and it's a character-driven piece essentially. This young guy has a girl that he's interested in and is sort of having an on-off relationship with, and she goes traveling at some point and comes back with this other guy in tow, and so the 3 of them form this kind of awkward trio, and it turns out he discovers the other guy has a hobby, which is going around randomly. Well, in the book it's burning barns, in the film it's burning greenhouses. And I can't really say too much more about this piece without spoiling it. It's one of those that doesn't have a huge plot as such. It's more about the characters and their journeys. So if you like that kind of deep thoughtful drama, then it's worth checking out. The next piece I watched was Haemoo. Now this is a story, again a drama. It's about a guy who runs a fishing boat, and he's down on his luck essentially. The fishing's not been great. He's not got a lot of money, and one day he decides to try his hand at smuggling. He assumes he's going to be smuggling goods. However, at the last minute, he finds out it's going to be people. So a storm's coming in, and he has all these people on his boat, and tensions kind of break loose, and sort of violence, let's say, erupts. I'm trying to tell you enough without spoiling it. So things go to pot basically on this boat in the middle of a storm with the Coast Guard on their tail, and people's true colours come out. I actually really enjoyed this one. It was a piece I watched just because I was watching Korean stuff. I didn't expect to be sucked into it as I was, but once things really broke out on the boat, it got going, and I found it quite gripping. And the story ending was perhaps a little bit unsatisfying for me. I wanted it to be a little bit happier than it was, but it was still really worth watching if you like, again, drama with a lot of characterization, and there's a bit of violence in this one. Next up, I watched The Witness, and the premise of this film is there's a guy who kills a woman outside in a sort of courtyard of a high-rise complex, and one of the characters witnesses this out the window, but the killer knows that he saw him and is threatening him to keep him quiet. So it's a drama. It's the issue of, is he going to come forward? But his family's been threatened if he does. And at the same time, the police are, going around pressuring people to say what they saw. It's a really good drama, a bit of a psychological thriller aspect to this one. So if that's your kind of thing, then you can definitely check out this one because you'd like it. And finally, the last one I watched was a Korean historical piece called The Great Battle. The Chinese are invading. They're sweeping everything before them, and they're heading towards this fort. And this fort is guarded by a man who's kind of considered a bit of a rebel. He's on the out with the government and the main military people at the moment. But in the end, he mounts a stirring defense of this fort. So it's a kind of heroic battle saga, if you like. And again, this was quite enjoyable. Plenty of blood and violence, if that's your kind of thing, but some good drama moments and character moments too. That finally brings me on to Netflix once I've had a quick drink. So I watched 5 things on Netflix during December. The first of those, which I actually started way back in about October, but I finally finished it in December, was Fullmetal Alchemist anime. This is one that it's such a famous one, and when I saw it was on Netflix, I figured I should watch it. I have already previously to the anime watched the film version, the live action film of Fullmetal Alchemist, and which I enjoyed. And the anime I did enjoy as well. I think the storyline's great. I love Edward and Alphonse as characters. I enjoyed sort of following their journey throughout. The only thing that I didn't love about this anime so much was the animation style. However, this is a pretty old piece now. I mean, we're pushing, 15 to 20 years old. So obviously techniques and technology has moved on quite a lot, and most of the stuff I watch is more current, more recent. So perhaps that's just an expectation I've got of the level of animation that just wasn't possible back then. So I did enjoy it. It was just, I thought once or twice, like here and there, the animation was a bit bleh, but the story and the characters I really enjoyed. And now let's talk about Alice in Borderland next. So this is a Japanese series, a Netflix series that only just came out, and I thought it was one my husband would potentially enjoy too, which is why we watched it. It was quite short, about 8 episodes. The premise of this story is there's a gamer. He and his friends are running from the police one day, going to a cubicle in the toilet cubicle in the train station. But when they emerge, everyone in Tokyo, or near enough everyone, the biggest chunk of the population, has disappeared. They soon find out that at night they are called to take part in games. And these are essentially death games. If you survive, great. If you choose not to play, you'll be killed. So you've pretty much got no choice but to try and get through the games. So it's a death game scenario, essentially. But it was really enjoyable. The games were interesting. There were some good character-driven moments as well. And it looks like potentially this will continue to a second series. And my husband and I would definitely both keep watching. So it's worth checking out. A little bit bloody and violent, but some good character piece as well. So the remaining 3 were all Korean series. So first up, we watched season 2 of The Voice, or just Voice, I think it's called. My husband and I watched the first series together, and we really enjoyed it. In the second series, the main guy is no longer in it. According to the series, he's taken his sick kid off to America to be treated. That's the reason for his absence. I assume he either just didn't want to do a second series or was busy filming something else. But for the purpose of the series, that's where he is. So there's a new main guy. I quite liked the main guy's storyline. He was interesting. He was a little bit unhinged. He wasn't a typical hero. However, overall, I don't think the series had quite the impact of season 1. The killer and the storyline around that wasn't quite as compelling for either me or my husband. We thought that the killer in the first one was a bit more engaging. There is a third season. If they put it up on Netflix, I probably will watch it. Sorry, my nose is itchy. But yeah, it didn't quite deliver for us compared to season 1. Next up, I Hear Your Voice. So this one is about a boy whose father is murdered when he's young, following a car crash. And at this point, he suddenly begins to hear people's thoughts. When it comes to putting away the killer, it's all thanks to a young schoolgirl who witnessed the event and who musters the courage to come forward. So years later, he's been trying to find her because he wants to repay what he sees as his debt to her. She's become a lawyer, but a rather disengaged one. She just goes through the motions. But reconnecting with him changes things for her, especially when the guy who killed the boy's father is released from prison and decides to seek revenge on her for having been the pivotal factor in getting him put away. So this was enjoyable. It wasn't my absolute favourite Korean drama. It's probably a middle-of-the-road one. The pacing here and there felt a little bit slow. But overall, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters and the actors in those roles. So it's worth watching if you're a K-drama fan, but it's not one I'd pick as my absolute top one that everyone had to watch. And finally, Love in the Moonlight. So this is an historical Korean drama, Chosen era again. And the basic premise is the main female character has been living as a boy most of her life. And through a series of unfortunate events, she ends up as a eunuch in the royal palace, where the crown prince, as always, there's always the crown prince, and the crown prince, as always, is facing difficulties. There's a political faction within the group of ministers who's against him. And with her help, he eventually is going to succeed. So that's the kind of premise. It's typical for the style of the piece. It was well acted. It was great fun. Good mix of drama and humor as always. And this was definitely one I would recommend watching if you like the Chosen era historical romances. So I think that brings us to the end. I've got a few things that I might actually finish off by the end of the month, but I'll report about them in January. That's Bridgerton, period drama on Netflix. Sweet Home, which is a Korean horror one we're watching on Netflix, my husband and I. And I'm also watching an online mini web drama miniseries because Lee So-hyuk is in it. It's called Handmade Love. We've got 2 more episodes to go of that, so it'll finish next week. So I will tell you about all those when I do my wrap up at the end of January. I will end there for now. If you're keen to hear what I've been reading as well, stay tuned because I'll be back in about 10 minutes or so once I've got it all set up to do the stream about my reading for December as well, and to wrap up my reading for the end of the year. So I hope you'll join me again soon. Bye for now, everyone. See you again.